freedom in a lifetime. We see violence all around, families broken down, injustice for the poor. As a nation we need you. Spoke now, God, we say God. Oh, we pray to you, God. We pray, Nobody tape, Uribon Sefil, Revisa Huena, Ibona Ante Morena, Nada ni God. Pray to you, oh God. We pray. You can be away. I get come on you on the man. What's this thing this
The organization is all about. Where do we come from? Where are we? Who are we? Are we still together? And then the fourth component, it then deals with the question of what do we seek to achieve? So the who are we, the character of the EFF is then dealt with in paragraphs 26 to 35. And then the fourth component is what do we seek to achieve? That is from paragraph 36 to paragraph 136. So 100 paragraphs of the founding manifesto of the EFF are dedicated to what do we seek to achieve. That is where the 7 cardinal pillars are explained and the 14 complementary pillars are explained. Out together. So that is what do we seek to achieve. And then the last component is who stands to benefit. So who stands to benefit is then from paragraph 126 to paragraph 138. That is the last paragraph. Who stands to benefit? So when we ask who stands to benefit, you are now asking who are the motive forces? Who are the forces that drive the motion? We're going to talk to that in terms of what happens. Now going back into the textual component of all of these aspects. Then the founding manifesto starts on top of that document with a quote from Frantz Fanon that says, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. We have in some previous interventions, I think when we're doing the 9th anniversary political lecture, explain what political generations can seek to achieve and what have been the most important generations in South Africa's political history. So ourselves, we are a generation of economic freedom in our lifetime. There's been a generation before of freedom in our lifetime, the freedom in our lifetime generation of those who started the Congress Youth League in 1944. So we are saying we are a generation of economic freedom in our lifetime. As a generation, all of us were involved in the struggle for economic emancipation. And Frantz Fanon says, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. So that is the foundational component that is highlighted in the founding manifesto of the EFF. And we then did say that the first component, paragraphs 1 to 7, which deals with the question of where do we come from, that part of the founding manifesto acknowledges that the struggle that we're engaged in, we are not inventing it as the EFF. We are not the first people to be involved in the struggle. we are taking over from those that have been fighting for it deals with the historical context of where we come from to acknowledge that since the advent of colonialism and colonization, we as the African majority, black people, we have been under colonial rule. We have fought so many battles. But we have not won the war. So in a war there are different battles. Like you can have one war which lasts for a very long time. And then you can win that battle there and that battle there. But in the overall outcome, the EFF's correct and logical conclusion is that we have not won the war. Actually, paragraph 2 of the EFF founding manifesto starts by acknowledging that the EFF recognizes that despite temporary victories in this or that battle, Africans were defeated, humiliated, and enslaved by colonial settlers, thereby symbolizing colonial victory over the indigenous people of the South African territory. So that fighters is the most important characterization of the struggle that we are in. That we are moving from the fact that as a people we are defeated, we are conquered. And that is a very important thing to acknowledge, because if you want to enter into battle with an illusion that you have won already, you will never have the same determination and energy to fight against oppression. And then in the entirety of the founding manifesto, which then deals with the question of where we are now, it gives a proper and vivid illustration of just what are the signs that we are defeated people, we are conquered people, we are landless. We are suppliers of cheap and easily disposable labor to colonial settlers and their descendants. That is what we are. All of us, the darker skinned people, all of us, black people, we are still slaves of the colonial settlers and their descendants. They've conquered us in every aspect of our existence. With everything. We do not have control of the economy. They've almost eroded our identity as a people. So the EFF moves from that perspective that we are a defeated people, we are a conquered people, and there is no one who is sound in their mind who can dispute the fact that as black people we are still a conquered nation. There have been so many battles to try to fight against this oppression, but in the ultimate end we are still a defeated people. There have been so many battles that took place, but the overall outcome of the war against colonialism is that we are still conquered, we are still colonized people. So the colonization, it's called neo-colonialism now. And the neo in the colonialism is just a contextual and a time period characterization. It's colonialism, just is happening in a different time context. But we're still a colonized people where our natural resources, our wealth, is being extracted by the colonial masters for their own benefit. They still dictate what we have to do. Are we together, fighters? So that is where we come from. And in paragraph 4 of the founding manifesto, it then says, while relatively developed, talking about South Africa, it says, while relatively developed, South Africa, like many other colonies, is still trapped in the colonial division of labor as supplier of primary commodities to the colonizer nations. This colonial feature cannot and will never be broken by continued economic dominance of private corporations. particularly in the natural and mineral resources sector. Multinational and private ownership of South Africa's commanding heights of the economy should be discontinued in order to stimulate state-led and aided industrial development. So that is what it then deals with in the first component of where do we come from. It characterizes that there have been battles that have been fought by our forefathers and foremothers. But the ultimate end game is that we are still a defeated people. If you think, or if anyone thinks that the struggle and the fights and the battles against colonialism ended up in the victory of Africans, that is illusionary, daydreaming, which has to be, and that is what every time we deal with political education, you must illustrate to our people that we are still an oppressed people. It has taken a different form in terms of what oppression is. And then there is characterization of where are we. That is the first major component of the EFF founding manifesto of where are we currently. And the most important characterization just from the first paragraph of that, in paragraph 8 it says the political power that was transferred to the black majority through inclusive elections in 1994 was never transformed into economic freedom, as the majority of Africans remain on the margins of society as unemployed, underemployed, or discriminated against in their employment, whilst those who held economic, social, and political power since the colonial period continue to enjoy economic, social, and professional privileges. And then in paragraph 11, it says, vestiges of apartheid and colonial economic patterns, ownership and control remain intact despite the attainment of political freedom by the former liberation movement. Political freedom without economic emancipation is meaningless. So that is what it characterizes, that where are we now is that we have got political power, but we do not have economic power. And make an analysis and a proper observation that political power without economic power and control of the economy is absolutely meaningless. So Kwame Nkrumah used to say that, and an interesting evolution of Kwame Nkrumah's thoughts, Kwame Sambu is saying, when he was in the early stages of the African Revolution, with Ghana being the first country to be liberated from colonialism in sub-Saharan Africa, meaningfully. Of course, Ethiopia was never colonized. They defeated colonialism. But in the liberation struggles, Ghana gained its independence first in 1957. When Kwame Nkrumah was agitating for liberation of many African countries, he used to say, seek ye first political power and the rest shall follow. And with maturity and now observation of what political power without economic power can do, he then came to acknowledge and realize that political power without economic power is meaningless. Out of gained experience. So Kwame Nkrumah led the revolution against colonialism in Ghana. It used to be called the Gold Coast Province. So it was there's a Gold Coast Province, but it was used to be Gold Coast. And then it was renamed to be Ghana after liberation. So from the rhetoric of saying, seek ye first political power and the rest shall follow, to now an acknowledgement that political power without economic power is meaningless. It means absolutely nothing. It's as if nothing has changed, because those who used to be the bosses, those who used to command, the economy, those who used to command the state continue to do so. In the case of South Africa, by the way, what got to happen, we did say yesterday that we are having the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And then that the bourgeoisie, those who have got the means, who own the means of production, they are the ones who control this government. Like they use it. Well, Karl Marx says it's an executive that manages the common affairs of the bourgeoisie, referring to government. So what the ruling class did in South Africa was to substitute a white-only government with a black government, but continued with capitalist exploitation and rulership over South Africa. Is that understood? So nothing materially and fundamentally changed except substitution of the political office bearers. Whilst the agenda of capitalist neo-colonial exploitation continues unabated without major changes. That is why the EFF founding manifesto says that vestiges I think is remains in a literal translation. Vestiges of apartheid and colonial economic patterns, ownership and control remain intact, meaning that they remain unchanged despite the attainment of political freedom by forces that were associated with the liberation movement. Political freedom without economic power is meaningless. So that is the characterization of where we are. I do not want to go purposefully through paragraph 29, which has got 15 subsections. Should I go through that, Kumsambo is saying? The diagnosis. Can you give me the book? Now, as part of the diagnosis of just where we are, in 2013 when the founding manifesto was being adopted, there was then characterization of what were the obtaining political dynamics, the domestic balance of forces in South Africa. So I'm going to go through that in paragraph 29. That deals with it's not paragraph 29 that I'm dealing with now. It's paragraph 24. Paragraph 24, that deals of where are we now. Paragraph 29 deals with the 7 cardinal pillars. In paragraph 24, it then deals with just where are we, politically the characterization of the politics of South Africa. It then says, as things stand, the following realities define South Africa and will obtain for a considerable amount of time. Number one, it then says that the former liberation movement in office will never be a sustainable solution to South Africa's development problems in the foreseeable future, owing to its ideological zigzags and the open dominance of neoliberal and right-wing politics. If left unchallenged by a radical left political formation, this will give rise to and attach some sense of political legitimacy to political parties whose agenda and political program is to continue with white supremacy and the imperialist domination of South Africa. That is absolute truth. I'm sure we agree with that, fighters, all together. That the ANC will never be a solution to South Africa's problems, because it doesn't have a standpoint ideologically as to what it represents. And it says the former liberation movement's integrity and credibility will gradually decline because it will not address the many massive developmental challenges confronting society in the current status quo. Poverty, unemployment, and inequalities are worsening under the post-1994 government. This is because the former liberation movement does not welcome radical policy shifts and is instead obsessed with protecting the interest of white monopoly capital. That is one of the observations that we made. Then it was saying in number 3 that political parties in opposition to the former liberation movement in office opposite it on superficial issues, because all the major political formations in parliament carry the same neoliberal, capitalist and free market program that the incumbent government does. There is currently no real ideological and political opposition to the post-1994 government's neoliberal policy framework, recently proven by all political parties' adoption of the National Development Plan. So in Parliament, in South Africa, we only have the EFF against the rest. The ANC, the Democratic Alliance, all of these parties, the IFP, they are all puppets of the ruling class. They are controlled fundamentally by the ruling class. And that was clearly demonstrated when we then introduced the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution. They all combined to say that we cannot amend the Constitution which protects white private property, which protects colonial private property. So the EFF is distinguished from all of these organizations. And contextually, the main distinction between the EFF and all these other political parties is that we are the party of the proletariat. We are the party of the working class. In a class-divided society, we are the only organization that unashamedly and consistently represents the interest of the working class. We do not tiptoe around the bourgeoisie or the owners of means of production. Listen to what the DA, IFP, GOOD, all of those parties were saying when we were dealing with Section 25. They say we cannot change Section 25 because investors are not going to be happy about it. When they say investors, they're talking about the bourgeoisie. But the EFF says that we're going to amend Section 25 because ultimately, in the ultimate end, we want to benefit our people. Those who do not own the means of production, we want them to be the ones who own the means of production. And the founding manifesto also observes that the Congress-aligned left-wing formations have been swallowed into reform politics and patronage and will never regain integrity to pursue real working class struggles anytime soon. That is an absolute fact. The organized left have been swallowed by the state and is currently at the forefront of justifying the rapacious and callous theft of public funds by the incumbent president of the republic. There was a contextual issue. It then also says in the founding manifesto of the EFF that the trade union movement, which is supposed to defend workers' interests, will soon be swallowed into the same politics of reform. All those who push for a radical agenda will be isolated, banished, and portrayed as anti-government. The dominant faction in the trade union movement will rid itself of progressive leaders. Despite massive and clear ideological differences, the trade union movement will once again encourage workers to vote for the current government. Despite its directionlessness, workers will again be misled and tied to their oppressors through sentiments of historical significance and blind loyalty. And in the context, that was a proper characterization of the Congress of South Africa's trade unions. They march all the years and have huge ideological and political differences, like real differences with the ruling party. But come elections, they said to workers, please go and vote for the ANC. That was a proper characterization of what was obtaining at that time. And then another observation made was independent trade unions will continue to emerge and grow bigger because previously dominant unions will gradually fail to represent workers. These independent trade unions are not a political alternative because they will only deal with workers' interests and will make workers believe that their problems are workplace issues only. That was a characterization of the emerging trend of new trade unions which were or becoming to be workerists. And that observation remains correct. The other observation is that the majority of people in informal settlements, townships, villages, and other poor communities will disengage from mainstream politics and not vote in successive elections. This will be sure to happen if, as fighters for economic emancipation, we do not offer a real ideological and political alternative to status quo. This is a very interesting observation, fighters, to say that with the manner in which the politics have been happening in South Africa, poor people will disengage from politics, which is the case. We have got more than 11 million people who are above the age of 18 in South Africa, who are not on the voters' roll. And to think that if you were to get 11 million votes in South Africa, you win elections. So you have got power outside of the voters' roll in South Africa. 11 million people. Maybe this justifies our campaign of voter registration in 2023, that we must register as many people as possible. We must put all those people into the voters' roll. And if you look deeply into the voter registration or non-registration patterns, it's mostly for Africans. So almost all white people are on the voters' roll. Almost all of them. Their voter participation is far much higher than the voter participation of Africans. And contextually, it's understandable because people say that, but we have been voting and there's nothing that happens. We have been staying here in Stratla, next to Jackskay River, like every time there's heavy rains, it lives with some of our neighbors. Wherever there is floods, the floods come and take some of our neighbors, and then they go to point of no return. And every time political parties come and say, vote for us, but our material conditions are not changing. And that is what happens in villages. There's no sign that there's any government that is existing in it. There's nothing which is government related or government interventions. No roads, nothing. In many instances, without water, there's a huge dam in Jozini in Mhlabalinga. The entirety of that area is called Mhlabalinga and Mkanyakudi. But you still have a lot of areas that do not have water. There's nothing government in many parts of Mhlabalinga. And people then get to say, why should we vote? Let's just continue with whatever we've been doing throughout. And that is the observation that the EFF made in 2013. And the other observation that was made was that the youth movement has been turned into a lapdog sent to repeat what the incumbent government leadership says. Puppet youth leaders will be rewarded with cabinet posts and other perks to sustain their puppet status. And we made this observation before even puppet youth leaders were awarded with cabinet posts, but we had already predicted that they will take some of the radical voices from the youth movement and make them ministers of justice, deputy minister of finance, and all of those things. And this is before it occurred that in 2013 we had seen the pattern that the system was designed to kill a youth movement. So when we're in the Congress Youth League, We used to say that revolutions are activities of young people. Which is correct, by the way. So when you do your own further self-education, you must check the ages of all the revolutionaries that we speak about. Patrice Lumumba, at what age did he have the most impact? Thomas Sankara, at what age did he have the most impact? Vladimir Lenin, at what age did he have the most impact? Che Guevara, Fidel Castro. So revolutions are products of young people, it's ideas of young people. And if you demobilize young people from political activity and activism, there will never be a revolution. There are no old people who are going to be revolutionaries. There are no revolutionary old people. It's activities of young people. So majority of old people, they become conservative. So they conserve truths of the past. They think that, no, this is how it is. We have been living like this for a very long time. They assimilate to what Assata Shakur says that, you know, people get used to these conditions and just accept that this is what it is. And a youth movement was annihilated and purposefully. It's not a mistake that the formal liberation movement does not permit existence of a youth movement. It's part of counter-revolution because they know that young people will always come with new ideas. Young people will always question the status quo to say, why is it? Because when we're leading the Congress Youth League, I'll give an example. That why should South Africa be this poor when it has got mineral resources? One of the richest countries in the entire world in terms of mineral resources. We ask that question. Why can't we nationalize these mines so that we can begin to industrialize our economy out of minerals? And that traction gained momentum in the liberation movement and had huge impact in terms of, so revolutions are activities of the youth. And we observed in 2013 that the youth movement will be turned into lapdog, and then those who will be puppet youth leaders will be awarded with cabinet posts and packs to buy their silence. And the other observation that we made was victimization of those who are suspected of being part of the political alternatives to the formal liberation movement will increase with threats of arrest, assassination, and the possible manipulation of the justice system. There are many economic freedom fighters in the formal liberation movement, particularly on the ground, and unfortunately, at all levels of its leadership, who will not publicly associate with real political alternatives because they are not scared of losing their jobs. And they are scared of losing their jobs and income. And the other observation was that the middle strata, which is written as middle class then, will further drift away from the formal liberation movement and beef up the neoliberal alternative. They are a contested terrain and need to be engaged because they stand to benefit from the victory of the economic freedom and the erosion of white supremacy. This is one of the most clear characterization and observation of what is happening. That the middle strata, so the middle strata, it's people who are part of the working class. They don't own the means of production, but they've got relatively better salaries and income, and then they feel like they are bourgeois sometimes. You find a middle strata person who owns a car or has been borrowed money by a bank to buy a car, saying, I'm a capitalist. I'm a capitalist. They go around like saying they're capitalist. They've been borrowed money by a bank to buy a car. Even the house that they stay in is owned by the bank. I believe in capitalism. It's false consciousness. It's false consciousness. And the middle strata has historically been characterized, even in the Communist Manifesto is characterized that it's a strata that is contested, that it zigzags. It's not reliable. You can't depend your revolution on the middle strata. So you see on Twitter, like, the EFF must march. Why is the EFF silent on electricity? Then the EFF march. Yeah, why is the EFF marching? That is the character of, and that is the character of the middle class and middle strata. And one of the things that we used to say as far much earlier, even in the formative stages of the EFF, was that if you want to be an amoeba politically, if you want to be shapeless, just try to please the middle strata. Just listen to what they say every time. Like, and then you think that can be a foundation of an organization. We are a working class organization that represents the interest of the working class. If you base your interest, I can tell you now, like, you can call a meeting today of the middle strata or middle class and say, what do you think we must do differently? They'll say all sorts of things and everything else, and then call them again in a week's time. They'll tell you the contrary to what they have told you like today. It's the nature of, but the most interesting component about the middle strata is that when the interest of the working class and the struggles of the working class are being pushed much more decisively and gaining momentum, they automatically will shift towards the working class and associate with that struggle. Are we together, fighters? So the middle strata will only be won through the political determination of working class parties. But we rest assured that when there is dominance of a different narrative, they will shift towards that component. And the observation was that the middle class or the middle strata will further drift away from the former liberation movement. So the areas, like if you were to look into previous election results, the areas which have got the highest number of middle class is the areas where the ANC is losing political power. So it started with Cape Metro, then Johannesburg, then Tshwane, then Ekurhuleni, then eThekwini, then Nelson Mandela Bay, then in KwaZulu-Natal as well, Mhlathuze, Richards Bay, because there is a relatively bigger number of the middle strata that is working in the industries there. And the EFF observed this pattern in 2013 to say that the middle strata will move or will drift away from and even in the areas where the ANC has not yet lost power, where they are declining drastically, it's areas where there is a higher number of the middle strata and young people. In Buffalo City, in Mangaung, in Polokwane, in Mfuleni, all of these areas. So that is the pattern which we have got to acknowledge in terms of and then part of the observations that was made was that service delivery protests will intensify and workplace stoppages in the mines and on farms will also continue in higher volumes than before, thus worsening the economic crisis in South Africa. Mine workers will become more militant and will fight struggles for their economic survival. And then an emphasis says that as economic freedom fighters we should be on their side. The other observation that was made is that social movements and issue-based organizations will remain on the margins of mainstream politics and only mobilize on sector-based issues, which will not relate to mainstream electoral and power politics. And then any form of generalized, so this check to what the founding manifesto says in 2013. It says any form of generalized uprising will be harshly suppressed by the state machinery in an attempt to prevent it from escalating to a level where a sitting government can be toppled. In 2013, already we had observed that any form of generalized uprising will be harshly suppressed by the state machinery in an attempt to prevent it from escalating to a level where a sitting government can be toppled. You have seen the reaction and the attitude of the state now with the national shutdown program of the EFF. Harshly suppressed, like they did everything. They called back all soldiers who were off duty and police, everyone. They even called for the reinforcement of private security companies and said to all those private security companies that you can take every firearm that you have, rifles. They got everything else to try to suppress a generalized uprising. The EFF says this 10 years ago as part of the characterization of the political conditions that are obtaining in South Africa. That is another characterization of where we are. And then it also says that the youth will become more disgruntled under the leadership of the former liberation movement. And like in all elections, the youth will continuously be fed empty promises on education and jobs which will never be created because there's no radical convincing plan on how this can be done. And another observation that was made was that South Africa has been turned into a kleptocracy, with government leaders openly looting state resources, pursuing self-enrichment, and classifying reports and processes that seek to expose such callous behavior. Those close to political leaders will get richer and more corrupt because they will know that, like them, they are immune from prosecution. That is a correct observation that we are in a kleptocratic state. Kleptocracy means a government of thieves. So the former liberation movement is running over a kleptocracy. So the former liberation movement, the ANC, is not an organization. So an organization is defined by unity of purpose. But that one is an association of self-seeking individuals who want to enrich themselves. There is no common purpose. I can tell you now, like you can isolate those people who are leading the former liberation movement and ask them one by one, what do you seek to achieve as an organization? They will tell you contradictory answers. Because there is no common agenda and mission of what they seek to achieve. So that is the characterization of the EFF in terms of where we are. Like that was a character. That is the component from paragraphs 8 to 25. That was characterizing where we are as a country, and that those then constituted legitimate and sound basis on founding a radical left political alternative. To say that our people are leaderless. And it appears now much more vividly that people are even shifting towards the much more extreme white political parties that are only protecting the interest of white capitalist interests. And then a radical left alternative had to be founded. And that is what then the EFF is then characterized of. Who are we? The character of the EFF. That the EFF is a radical, leftist, anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist movement with an internationalist outlook anchored by popular grassroots formations and struggles. That the EFF will be the vanguard of community and worker struggles and will always be on the side of the people. The EFF will, with determination and consistency, associate with the protest movement in South Africa and will also join in struggles that defy unjust laws. That is the characterization of the EFF, that we're a left organization. So left organizations are organizations that are anti-capitalist, that are anti-imperialist in character and nature. So that is the characterization of the EFF. It also says in the EFF that, in the characterization of who we are, that the EFF will contest political power because we are guided by the firm belief that we need political power in order to capture the state and then transform the economy for the emancipation of black South Africans, especially Africans. The forms in which the EFF contests political power will from time to time be reviewed in light of prevailing circumstances. But the primary role of the mass organization and activism as a means to raise the political consciousness of the people will remain the bedrock of our political practice. So we are an economic emancipation movement that contests political power so that we can transform the economy. Look, we do not separate the two. It's a component of it, of how we handle that. And we then emphasize the fact that from time to time, the manner and approach in which we contest political power will be reviewed. What does that mean? It means that we are currently contesting political power through elections as the EFF. But if the democratic space is closed for us to contest political power through elections, we are going to contest political power through mass uprisings that seek to overthrow a government. If that is closed as well, we are going to then turn into militant action, military action to overthrow a government that is illegitimate. But whenever we seek to do that, the masses must be behind that particular struggle. Are we together, fighters? And highest levels of political consciousness. Somebody said yesterday that class consciousness is political consciousness. It's the only form of political consciousness. So the founding manifesto says that we should always raise the levels of class and political consciousness amongst our people. That is what the founding manifesto says we should always do. That the people must be aware of just which class do they belong to and what interest do they serve and who represents them. And I hear, so some fighters mostly get to be exuberant. Maybe so youthfulness sometimes is intertwined with exuberance. And every time they say, no, why are we not taking up arms now and remove government through arms? You can't, now the democratic space is not closed for us to contest political power. Also, if you are not guaranteed that the masses are behind you and then you want to overthrow government through military means, you are no longer a revolutionary party, you are a terrorist organization. So terrorism is that thing of using violence to impose your minority, insignificant views on the whole of society, like Boko Haram. Boko Haram in Nigeria, they say, no, Islam must rule here. If it doesn't rule, we're going to cause violence. That is not the form of struggle that we're engaged in as the EFF. Are we together, fighters? Our struggle is about persuasion. It's about raising the levels of class consciousness amongst the people so that they become their own liberators. That is what we stand for. So the political education officers, leadership of provinces, don't get excited one day and say when branches are trying to agitate you that why are we not taking up arms, and then you say no, we're going to set up a military wing. You must never get excited. Our tools now, our arms, our armaments now is the ideological battle. as raising the levels of class consciousness. It's persuasion that we spoke about yesterday. And that does not mean that when the political space is closed, we are not going to explore all other means necessary to take political power. So that is the characterization of the EFF. It also emphasizes that we are a Marxist, Leninist, and Fanonian organization. So as a revolutionary movement, we learn from what Vladimir Lenin says. He says that without revolutionary theory, there cannot be a revolutionary movement. We also learn from Karl Marx, who says that practice without theory is blind, and theory without practice is sterile. And then Karl Marx actually emphasizes something where he says that theory becomes a material force as soon as it is absorbed by the masses. I used to confuse the word absolve and absorb. So it's absorbed by the masses, like as it's sunk in by the masses. The theory becomes a material force as soon as it is absorbed by the masses. So the EFF is a Marxist, Leninist, and Fanonian organization. So we need ideological tools of analysis. We need some lenses. We need a telescope to understand society. And ideological telescopes and proper theoretical basis is very important for a revolutionary organization. So it makes you to view society better. It makes you to give logical predictions. So you are able to say that this is how a class behaves, this is how class interests are pursued, this is what is going to happen. Are we still together, fighters? So we need to, without ideological tools of analysis, we are not going to have an organization that is consistent and can be able to win over society in terms of what a Marxist, Leninist, and Fanonian organization. I was going to speak about what that means, but we've got separate presentations. Commissar Dr. Mbui saying, we've got separate presentations on who is Karl Marx and what is Marxism, what is Leninism, and what is Fanonian school of thought. And how does it relate to the struggles that we are engaged in? But these are the tools of analysis that we ascribe to as the EFF. But in summary, from Marxism, we get to learn and appreciate the nature of the class struggle, to appreciate that we are in a class war. We are in a class struggle, that we are in a struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, between the capitalist and the working class. That is what we learn from Marx. But also from Lenin, we learn how to properly characterize the state. That the state, we're going to speak about it tomorrow, or today, that the state is a product of the irreconcilable antagonisms between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. But despite that, it's a product of the irreconcilability of class antagonisms. It still becomes an instrument of class rule. We're going to simplify that whichever state is in place in a capitalist society, it's nothing but an instrument of class domination, of capitalist class domination. So we then learn that characterization from Lenin. But also Lenin teaches us about organization. What should be the nature and form of a vanguard party? The EFF says that we're going to be the vanguard of community and political struggles. And what should be the role of a revolutionary party in terms of raising class consciousness? We learned that from Lenin. And then from Fanon, we learn the pitfalls of national consciousness. That the weakness is, and we have to clarify this, and I think this is one of the things which I'm sure Komsambo Hussein is going to talk to when he talks about Fanon. That the EFF is not a nationalist organization. We're a working class organization. We're driven by working class consciousness. It even says with an internationalist outlook. That is what the EFF is all about. So that is what defines who we are as the EFF. And then the 100 paragraphs of the 138 paragraphs of the EFF then deals with the question of what do we seek to achieve as the EFF. Then outlines the 7 cardinal pillars for economic freedom in our lifetime. Non-negotiable cardinal pillars. Cardinal pillar number 1 is expropriation of South Africa's land without compensation for equal redistribution. Cardinal pillar number 2 is nationalization of mines, banks, and other strategic sectors of the economy without compensation. Cardinal pillar number 3 is building state and government capacity, which will lead to the abolishment of tenders. Cardinal pillar number 4 is free quality education, healthcare, houses, and sanitation. Cardinal pillar number 5 is massive protected industrial development to create millions of jobs, including the introduction of minimum wages in order to close the wage gap between the rich and the poor, close the apartheid wage gap, and promote rapid career paths for Africans in the workplace. Cardinal pillar number 6 is massive development of the African economy and advocating for a move from reconciliation to justice in the entire continent. Cardinal pillar number 7 is open, accountable, corrupt-free government and society without fear of victimization by state agencies. So that is the core of the program that the EFF exists for. That we need to take back our land. And the manner in which we say the land must be expropriated without compensation, or the manner in which the land must be repossessed without compensation. The founding manifesto says that what happened to the mineral resources in South Africa should be done to the land question. So in 2002, Parliament passed the Minerals and Petroleum Resources Development Act, which said that the mineral resources that used to belong to private companies before are now under the custodianship of the state, which then has an obligation to redistribute it equally to the people. The current state and government is not doing so. Wait until the EFF becomes government. We will make sure that the mineral resources are redistributed equitably for the benefit of all people. Because there is a legal and legislative instrument to could achieve that currently. But because the government that is in office is nothing but an executive that manages the common affairs of the ruling class of the bourgeoisie, they won't do anything about that. It needs a revolutionary and socialist organization and government to change how resources are allocated. So that is how it is dealt with. Nationalization of mines, banks, we have dealt with this and even with contextual reasons in the founding manifesto of why nationalization is going to benefit all our people. That building state capacity comes some gain and Victor. Building state capacity is purposeful. That we are now overburdened by an incapable, nanny state which cannot do anything. The current design of government is that it does not have capacity to perform any function. So if they have to build a road, they must then call for private sector to be the ones who must tender to build a road. If they want to build a school, they must do so. They must issue a tender for everything, even to write letters. So if a municipality wants to collect debt from people, they say, no, this thing of writing letters is a lot. Let's get a company which is going to write letters for us to send to people who must pay municipal bills. And it's even in the law, by the way, to incapacitate the state that. So those who go to the state are just tender administrators. Whilst the state must have its own engineers, project managers, structural engineers, everything to then do its own things. I mean, and some of this approach of how government deals with basic things, some of it is just purely cruel and senseless. How do you have a tender for cleaners? How do you have a tender for people who work with you every day? And then the ones that work with you every day, you give money to someone else. Sometimes to even huge corporations. Like there's a company which Sir Ramaphosa used to be a chairperson of called Bidvest. That company even exists in London. For a worker who works with you every day, is cleaning around you, for the work that they are performing there, you pay money for a company that is in London. And then you pay like 15,000 rand. And then that company gives that person 5,000. What? It's absolute rubbish and senselessness. That you want to enrich one person. You want to enrich one person elsewhere, like at the expense of the people that you work with every day. Even with security, I don't know why we must take up the struggle of the working hours of security guards of 6 to 6. A person leaves their home and go and sit in some guard house from 6 o'clock to the other 6, 12 hours. 12 hours of uninterrupted work, and then you have a government that does not give that person money, gives someone else. G47, a multinational company. Give money for a security guard who is guarding government buildings. Gives money to this security guard who is sitting in some small house where they can't stretch their legs. For 12 hours. And then that money is given to some company which is also responsible for prisons in Israel and all of those other things. Gives that company 18,000, 20,000 for this worker who is staying in a guard house. And then that company gives that person 2,500. We can't be that government as the EFF. It can't be us. We have got a government that just wants to empower the capitalists. And that is what distinguishes us from these organizations. That we are an organization that is acting on behalf of the people. What gives the capitalists the right to earn majority of the income that is generated by the workers? That is what distinguishes the EFF. That is why a cardinal pillar says we must build state capacity. And I can tell you, fighters, that part of what will be the challenge of the economic freedom fighters in the future, not now, will be a temptation to want to undermine or reduce this cardinal pillar on building state capacity. Because you are going to occupy political offices in government. Majority of you, some of you are in government already, where you are responsible for a lot of resource allocation. I can tell you now that when time progresses, you are going to have this capitalist who will come to your house and say, but hey, MMC or MEC, minister, Why are you staying in a house this small? We can give you a bigger house somewhere. Why are you driving this car? We can give you a better car. And then they'll be asking you, why are your children going to a public school? Why can't you take them to schools that start with ST, Saint something? And then you get excited, and then they say, no, we can take care of all of those things. And then they will later on come back to you to say, but you must give us a tender. You are going to come and try to rationalize with us that, no, but comrades, no, leadership, this is strategic. This one is strategic. You are going to come to us and say, no, but also elections are coming. We need the resources. And that will be, and the moment we begin to undermine the cardinal pillars of the EFF, we are undermining its foundation. So if, figuratively, the pillars were like building a house, like if this organization is held by pillars, if you destroy one, you'll go for the next one, the other one, the next thing, the house will no longer be in existence. This structure which is held by the pillars, the 7 pillars, if you destroy one, you will destroy the other one. Before you know it, there is no more organization. And we have to be true to ourselves all the time in terms of what we stand for. And then the other pillar is free quality education, healthcare, houses, and sanitation. So that is emphasized, then it deals with all of those issues. It even talks to, if you read deeper in the founding manifesto, it then talks to just how we should utilize our international relations to send some of the best students or students to different parts of the world to learn different experiences in different corners of the world. It's in the founding manifesto of the EFF. It's contained there in terms of those issues. And of course, it speaks to the change of the curriculum in terms of what happens. Not through the decoloniality scholarship, is it Coquette from Johannesburg, who always talks about decoloniality. Because this decoloniality scholarship just focuses on epistemic decoloniality without looking into colonialism itself. And colonialism is economic domination. But they're saying, let's deal with the consequences of economic domination without dealing with the foundation itself, which is also misleading in terms of how it is handled. You must deal with it in a different context. You must take it by the roots. Like if you are dealing with the top, it becomes a big difficult. And then the other pillar, number 5, is massive protected industrial development. That we need to industrialize our economy. That we have made many illustrations. We have made in Parliament several illustrations that there is no country that has ever got to be developed without going through industrialization. Nowhere in the world. So we need to pursue massive protected industrialization so that we do not import almost all goods and services that we consume. Currently, we are just consumers of finished goods and products from other parts of the world. And that should not be the case. We can be able to protect our industries. We can do what Vietnam has done. We can do what the People's Republic of China has done. And then, of course, do that with the continent in the perspective. And cardinal pillar number 6 is massive development of the African economy and advocating for a move from reconciliation to justice in the entire continent. We must stop the illusion that we are just going to develop South Africa outside of the entire African continent. So Kwame Nkrumah says that colonization involves the breaking up of formerly large territories into small, non-viable states. That is how colonization got to divide us senselessly. Divided our people. Do you know in the borders between Swaziland and South Africa, there's a village which even the village chief is recognized in the part of Swaziland and parts of South Africa, but they say it's two different countries. Same in Mhlabelingane. The Tembe nation, Katembe. The kingdom of Hosi Tembe is recognized in the Mozambican part and this part of South Africa. Same in the borders between South Africa and Botswana. Almost everywhere, like where they just came and said, no, you are defined by these borders. And we fall for that. So the founding manifesto of the EFF speaks about an integrated economy in the African continent, a rail project that must interconnect the entire continent. It speaks about electrification of the entire African continent, that we should purposefully pursue that so that we're all developed meaningfully. Because the entirety of the African continent has been taking our resources to the Europeans, to the Americans, to China as well. We have not been adding value in the natural resources that we have, but we can do so. We have got everything here in the continent. Majority of the consumable products that are being produced all over the world, they are originating from here in the African continent. And to maximally benefit out of that, we need to integrate our economy. We should promote intra-African trade. And we must purposefully do so. So when the Organization of African Unity was founded in 1963, there were two different perspectives on whether we should integrate the continent or we must just promote cooperation. And then the ones who pushed for cooperation, continental cooperation, won. They did not win on the Pan-Africanist integration agenda that let's integrate all our systems. And those who were advocating for cooperation included Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, the first president of the United Republic of Tanzania. But later on, he got to realize he actually delivered a lecture where he was saying he's apologizing for having pushed for cooperation. He should have put for integration. Kwame Nkrumah was the one who pushed far much more firmly for integration of the entire African continent. Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Emperor Haile Selassie said these borders are senseless. They are foolish. So our class consciousness also makes us realize that our alliances is with working class forces in other parts of the African continent, even across the borders. That is why we are purposefully building the EFF in other parts of the African continent. The Liberia Economic Freedom Fighters will be going into its first National People's Assembly at the end of this month. In Namibia, we have got the Namibian Economic Freedom Fighters, which has got 2 members of parliament now. I suspect there will be more than 20 because there's about 183 members of parliament in Namibia. I suspect there will be more than 20, if not more than 30 in the next elections. They have got elections in November next year. So we must get fighters from Northern Cape and who can familiarize, because there is too much, there is commonality in terms of the issues that we deal with, to go and reinforce the Namibian economic freedom fighters to be a force that is reckoned with. And that, it's, fighters, that thing is the most progressive thing that we can ever get to achieve. So now we went to the Interparliamentary Union meeting of about 179 parliaments in the world. We went to a country called Bahrain, in a city called Manama. It's in the Middle East, next to the Emirates. And there was a delegate there from the Parliament of Namibia who was representing the EFF. So already you have got an ally, like, in an international platform, that this is the position we're going to push in terms of this question. So once we are represented everywhere, even when we go to the Pan-African Parliament, we'll know that there's EFF delegates from Liberia, from Ghana, from Kenya, from Malawi, and from other different parts of the African continent. And it will be possible to achieve that. We should have presence everywhere, including in Zambia. In Zambia, it's a candidate who contested in the name of the EFF, but we had not coordinated that properly, and they did not win any representation. So the agenda for the integration of the African continent is a logical one. Anything else is foolishness. Anything else is senseless. Like, there is no way to characterize it in terms of what happens. And this then relates to what we spoke about yesterday of the levels of class consciousness. That if you do not have proper political consciousness, you are then arrested into this national consciousness. It starts with the national consciousness that no, South Africans were against the Zimbabweans and Mozambicans. Like, so imagine what we're talking about. Like, let's say the people in the Tembe village in Mhlabalingan and Mozambique. Then you must go to them there and say, no, you must see against Mozambique because they're against themselves. Like, they're in the same village. But there's a line there that says this is a border that divides you. We can't be part of and it's one of the things that we should always clarify much more emphatically. And we should take society along in terms of how we deal. We should purposefully develop the entire African continent. Intra-African trade must be developed, must build a common rail project. And by the way, when this pillar got to be drafted, it was before Agenda 2063 was adopted by the African Union. And part of what Agenda 2063 encapsulates is what is contained in the founding manifesto of the EFF in terms of economic integration. It doesn't make sense that we're not integrated. The other pillar, the last pillar, is open, accountable, corrupt-free government and society without fear of victimization by state agencies. That we should rid ourselves of all forms of corruption. We must be open about what we do. That is a very important component that we then deal with. And on what is to be done as well, of where do we want, what do we seek to achieve. We then have got policy expressions on almost all spheres of society in terms of just what direction are we taking. One, decentralized spatial development and building of new cities. We want to move away from the apartheid spatial planning. So spatial, I think, comes from the word space. So apartheid had just built few economic centers and then created hinterlands where they threw black people at. So we need to blur the distinction between rural and town, between rural and urban. It's one of the 10 demands in the Communist Manifesto. It says that we must blur the distinction between urban and rural. That all services must be provided equally in all parts. So the EFF Founding Manifesto says we need to decentralize. We must have new cities everywhere in South Africa that people do not have to all conglomerate or just gather in the city of Johannesburg looking for jobs and opportunities. Public representatives using public services. And then it says in the Founding Manifesto that those who are responsible for allocation of resources should utilize public services to inspire confidence in society. Public schools, public transport wherever is necessary, and all those aspects that are public health care. Just through issuing statements, we condemn, we must do things much more meaningfully. In terms of part of the progressive internationalism that we stand for is this thing of building a continent-wide economic emancipation movement that is required. Then the other cardinal, the complementary pillar, is on the sports, arts, and culture question. That should be decentralized to all spaces in society. Gender and sexuality question, that we are an organization that fights for one non-sexist organization. We are not like other organizations that were founded on their foundation was sexism. They never allowed women in their leadership ranks, like the former liberation movement. For years, it had to take a Congress resolution that, comrades, should we allow women to lead here? They had to take a resolution in a conference. And there were people who were opposed to that. Ourselves were founded on non-sexism, where we, and the most progressive issue, let's say we deal with at the representation level, is that in all spheres of representation, in the EFF, females are either majority or always is compulsory to be at 50-50 or more. Females are always represented. We are the only political party which has got more female representation of public representatives in parliament and all the councillors. We've got 1,200 councillors. Majority of them is females. In parliament, in the National Assembly, in the National Council of Provinces, majority of members of parliament of the EFF are female. When other organizations are putting quotas of 80%, and we always, our people's assemblies are always attended by majority female delegation. That is the manner in which, that is how we deal with the representation question. And of course, that is not the entirety of the gender and sexuality question, which the Founding Manifesto deal with. And then there's a component that talks to the immigration question in the Founding Manifesto and highlights the basic fact that all immigrants, even socio-economic immigrants, must be protected, must be given basic rights. We cannot and we will never be part of those that say a person, because they are an immigrant, they can't gain access to public health care. We'll never say that. It can't be us. They must not be allowed in schools. The next thing you're going to say, they must not drink water as well. That is where it's going. That is how reactionary national consciousness can be. That is the extreme levels where you just think, like, our fellow African brothers and sisters, no, this one must not gain access to health care because they were born on the other side of the river. Like, and a person goes around that, yeah, there's a full criminal who was saying the other time that If I become a president, I'm going to even unplug ICU machines from black people in hospitals because they are not born in South Africa. That can't be the EFF. So the founding manifesto also even deals with basic issues to say, so we have got African brothers and sisters who are even denied burial rights here. There are so many South African exiles who are still buried in Zambia, in Tanzania, in Uganda. When we're fighting against apartheid, when they died, they gave them dignified burial sites, which are identifiable. But a lot of municipalities and systems in South Africa deny immigrants burial rights, to the extent that when someone dies from Zimbabwe, because it's very expensive to transport a corpse or a person who's dead, like through the formal way, then when they pack into the buses, they're like, no, those buses with huge luggages, they wrap up bodies of dead people and put them there to transport back home. And then when those cars get into accident, and then when they're looking for people, they find that this person didn't die out of this accident. That is how cruel we can be. That can be us. And we have to patiently take society along in terms of this perspective. We must persistently deal with this perspective until it gains proper traction, that we are not going to hate on our African brothers and sisters whom we are told to hate because of colonialism. And then the other complementary pillars on monetary and fiscal question that basically emphasizes that we must utilize monetary and fiscal policy to drive industrial expansion. And then the other component that we spoke about in Parliament was the issue on energy security, which says that we should explore the usage of uranium as a source of energy. Like uranium produces nuclear energy. So it's in the EFF founding manifesto. And the focus on science and technology is one of the complementary pillars. The support given to research, innovation, and enterprise development is one of the complementary pillars. And then one of the complementary pillars is making one city the administrative and legislative capital of South Africa. So when colonialists settled after the Anglo-Boer War, when they reached an agreement of how are they going to form this new South Africa, the 4 provinces which used to exist, which later on became one South Africa, Natal, Transvaal, the Orange River Colony, which is now the Free State, and then the Cape. They then said, no, because we are now 4 colonies coming as one, let us subdivide the capitals. Then they said the Orange River Colony, which is the Free State, will be the judicial capital. That is why even the Supreme Court is still there now. The Supreme Court of Appeal is still there now. And then they said that the administrative capital will be Transvaal. That is why the administrative capital of South Africa is still Pretoria now. Then they said the legislative capital will be the Cape. That is why Parliament is senselessly in Cape Town. One of the most senseless, most illogical things ever. To have a legislative body in the furthest corner of our country. Because a legislative body must be in a central area which is accessible by everyone. But now, because Parliament has to receive public submissions and petitions, and it's almost impossible for many people to get to Cape Town. But if it was in a central place which is accessible, people were going to even have interest to bring their issues to the attention of Parliament. But currently, the way it is located, it's senseless. The EFF says that we must have one capital city which must be at the center of South Africa and accessible so that people gain access to everyone. And then the other question is on the transformation of the criminal justice system, and then on the relationship, the last complementary pillar on the relationship with the security forces. So those are the key issues that are dealt with. And then the last component of the founding manifesto is who stands to benefit. And at the center of that is the emphasis that the African working class is at the core of who we represent as the EFF. It also purposefully characterizes that the colored working class. It also talks about the Indian working class and the white working class. So we are a class organization. We are an organization of the working class. We are not an organization that is all over in terms of what we represent moving forward. So that is what the EFF Founding Manifesto is all about. And how do we get there? I'm closing now, Komisambo is saying, before we take questions. Is that one, we must have organizational power. We must have an organization. We must have a coherent organization. So that we can have mass power, the masses behind us. You can't mobilize the masses behind you if you do not have an organization. So our path to power, let's go like that. Let's write down factors. Amend the question paper. One is organizational power. Two, the organizational power is going to give us mass power, the masses behind us. Three, the masses behind us are going to give us political power. So once you've got the masses behind you, the people behind you, you're going to gain political power. So the size of the people who are behind you matters. So size in a revolution matters. I don't know why it doesn't matter, but in a revolution, it does. So the number of people who follow you, who are persuaded by the agenda that you stand for, matters in a revolution. Organizational power, mass power, then mass power will give us political power. And political power will give us state power. So unlike those who are an executive that manages the common affairs of the bourgeoisie, ourselves, we are going to be representing the interest of the working class. So our state, the manner in which we are going to utilize the state and the government will be doing that on behalf of the proletariat, on behalf of the working class. So it will be a working class state that represents the interest of the working class. And in some instances will even suppress the resistance by the bourgeoisie. So sometimes it's called dictatorship of the proletariat. So Lenin even calls it democratic dictatorship of the proletariat. It sounds contradictory. But it's a democratic dictatorship of the proletariat, meaning that the majority will be determining the agenda of what happens. Everything else that our democratic dictatorship of the proletariat will be doing will be to protect the interest of the people. So state power will then give us access to economic power. Then we are going to be able to redistribute the resources equitably, empower everyone to achieve all these aspirations that we have set in the agenda to achieve economic freedom in our lifetime. And organizational power is constituted by individuals, yourselves, political education officers. We need all of you to have the necessary determination individually. Then you add value into the organization. G.W. Plekhanov wrote an article on the role of an individual in a revolution. we must circulate that as part of the reading material, where you are going to get to appreciate just what becomes the role of individuals in a revolution. But of importance is that we have to be selfless. We must not be utilizing the organization as an instrument for self-enrichment. If that becomes the purpose, this organization is not going to live forever. It's going to be undermined, it's going to decline into insignificance. And there will not be any voice for black people in society. Yesterday, after the political school, we were reflecting and recognized the simple fact that, let's say, for benefit of doubt, the ANC was the voice of black people. But ourselves and the ANC are below 50% of the vote in the city of Johannesburg and in Tshwane. And the ones who are majority are pure white political parties. And we were reflecting to imagine that it's possible that such can be elevated to provincial level, even national level, if we are not vigilant ourselves. If we do not show the necessary determination and focus that is needed. So that is the founding manifesto. Fighters, let us continue to fight. Let's take questions. Thank you very much. Kumsambu Hussein.
Amandla bathi wenu likwa kwa ye yo bathi wenu likwa ye awe yo wenu likwa au kwa ye bathi izolo begumnandi namhla kuyalewa sinqanda maye izolo begumnandi bathi sinqanda maye thina sinqanda maye athe saseshilo sathi lo mhlaba saseshilo sathi lo mhla thina sinqanda maye thina sinqanda maye athe saseshilo sathi lo mhla thina saseshilo sathi lo mhla awe sinqanda maye thina sinqanda maye cheers amaye athi wenu likwa ye auye yo athi wenu likwa ye auye yo mandla DP, we had prepared the tea break at 11, but if Tembi is kind, we can take it at past. Just take reflections on the founding manifesto. Komsa Tembi is hopefully receiving the message, yeah. So let us take one round again regarding the founding manifesto, and then after the tea break, we're going to do the Constitution and the Code of Conduct combined. And DP, I thought, I wanted this to be read word by word, but under paragraph number 99 and 100 must be the point of departure on this border question, because I'm suspecting it's going to arise. So let's read what we wrote in 2013, word by word. It's under the title of Progressive Internationalism, which is an additional or complementary cardinal pillar. The EFF will also advocate for the ultimate integration of the continent, of the African continent, through the erosion and eventual elimination of unnecessary borders, which in the case of South Africa will entail Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland borders in a manner that involves and includes the participation and approval of those countries. This will also be encouraged in other parts of the continent. Okay? 100. The EFF will also advocate for common infrastructure for transport, roads, railways, harbors, etc., electricity, and water. Africa should use its resources to benefit all people of the continent, of the African continent, in a manner that will lead to collective upliftment. But paragraph 99, if you can internalize this statement, what is the EFF position? Why is the EFF constantly borders? Here it is. We will advocate for the ultimate integration of the African continent through the erosion and eventual elimination of unnecessary borders, which in the case of South Africa, in the immediate, we cannot say that Botswana people are not part of us. That is ridiculous. We cannot say Basotho people are not South Africa. We cannot say Swati people are not us. Those are already strategic borders, and if you think about the British planning, they were about surrounding the Boers DP in the military contestations, so that if there were to be problems, there's even those things in Botswana of landing strips for the US base, including the United States military base itself. This integration of the continent, and of course you read it alongside the immigration question. The immigration question is the famous one, which they convolute with the borders. But I thought you must see it in black and white. Let's take hands. I'm going to be a bit strict now with comrade women in the room. Men and women want to hear women. So if there are 3 hands of women on the floor, we will only take 3 hands of men. Are you a man? You will not be number 1. Are you a woman? You will be number 1. And then where's the other woman? I go a woman, you are a woman. You forgive me, fighters. 2. And then Maraga, Anika. That's 3. 4. Am I right about the gender? That's 4. And then 5, ne? Maybe you have started to sense what I'm doing. You would have taken your hand down. Because there's no way I'm going to point at you, because I'm pointing at women. You are number 5. Konomye. Women. Number 6. Yes, 6 hands of women. Yeah, let's hear women only, actually. Thank you. Number 1, woman number 1. We'll take you, comrades, as the liberation happens. As the liberation of women. Can you listen to women only? Last night it was only men and 2 women. TP. All right. We'll take the other 6 hands. Let's take them of men. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let's take number 1. Number 2, we've not heard your voice. Number 3 in the white. And number 4 in front. Number 5 at the back. Number 6 here. Okay. Number 1, go.
Thank you very much.
Remember the 2 minutes rule so that we all contribute.
The EFF, after using the ideology, will be forced to the constitution. So a constitution is just a paper and a pen. Constitution alone will not force bourgeoisie, also will not force Americans to give us the land. So then the organization EFF in power will have to use military means. Because give us the winning just because the constitution is so bad. So we do not want a situation whereby our own voters, EFF, turn against us because of the infiltration by a system. Because the system, the moment when we start to implement our socialist ideas, which are the cardinal pillars of the EFF, bazo infiltrator, and then they will impose the organization as dictators. The same way they did with Gaddafi, President Gaddafi. So we need to be voted by people who are conscious, so that when we start to implement our basic or our fundamental ideas, bangabi surprised. So Uguti manje sebe surprised Uguti wanted to expropriate the land and all those things. So the question in closing, Uguti, how do we make sure that now we decolonize the mind while waiting for economic freedom, so that our voters to Azowaz would mess votela EFF, we are voting for land expropriation, and mess voteli EFF because immediately there are sanctions when we assume power. Thank you.
Number 1 of the males. Stand. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Comrade Commissar Mboiseni Ngozi, Comrade Deputy President Fred Bambo, and all commissars who are here, peace team members in Ground Forces. No, look, I wanted to deal with these 4 questions. I have a few questions. Credentials wise. I'm from the Cape Metro, in the Western Cape. So I'm going to deal, so.
And then your name?
Yeah, my name is Pumelelani Mshumi.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We still have the blood of student command in us, so we're going to speak far more decisively in terms of what was presented. So the attitude of the founding manifesto has been a cause of debate perhaps on social media spaces because, it's not upfront about its class, appreciation at a far more focused rate because there is a misconception that the EFF is a reductionist type of organization, class reductionist type of organization. So I think, Comrade Deputy President, perhaps in response, I would like something far more clearer in terms of the race question and the class question, in terms of directly as the EFF posture has been presented, because in my interpretation, particularly from today, it has become far more clearer that we are a Marxist organization primarily. Of course, not to negate the Fanonian question in terms of the race aspect, but I wanted perhaps a far more clearer type of answer in terms of that aspect.
What is class reductionism?
It's the argument that the only issues that face society, cannot be understood outside of class. So,
And where is that in the manifesto?
Yeah, no. Hence, I'm saying, Comrade Deputy President, Commissar, that the interpretation from my end,
Okay. I agree you are making the claim. The manifesto of the EFF is class reductionist.
No. I think perhaps maybe it was my articulation, Comrade Deputy.
Okay, if you are done, we can move elsewhere. I want to help you. Did you see class reductionism in the founding manifesto? Yes or no?
No, Comrade.
Oh, you want a articulation from the DP that helps highlight the fact that it is not class reductionist?
100%.
Okay, next question.
Yes. The education, I would have loved that to be President speak far more emphatically on that point, but the relative autonomy that I think, Doctor, you have spoken to other platforms, but I wanted at least a touch upon that in terms of when the EFF comes into power, what will be the attitude towards the universities of higher learning in terms of governance? I'm going to be very swift because you can see that.
Okay, you have taken longer than you should, so to conclude.
One more, Comrade Commissar. Yeah, no, in my understanding, far more, as Van Vala Commissar, that I will never claim that the manifesto is incomplete, but there is an aspect of the radical voices of intellectuals which I don't think has been touched upon emphatically. So I would, of course, at this level, like, some type of a view from the leadership of the EFF in terms of, perhaps not a negation, but rather an acknowledgement of that type of a revolutionary voice in terms of the revolution. Thank you, Commissar.
Number 2 of the ladies. Please stand when we call on you so that the mic knows where to go. Thank you. Chairperson of Limpopo.
Ndolibuwa dzina langa ndifichiridze maraga ndibva kawa 22 Makhado ka vundu la Limpopo. Greetings commissars who are here, and special greetings to you, Deputy President and Commissar Ndozi. We thank the presentation that the Deputy President did. Deputy President, I have a question here. Under who stand to benefit? Indeed, the working class must benefit. You even said or outlined more of we must not utilize the organization for self-interest, but you will find that in other cases, we just come here and say it theoretically so, and we don't go out there and implement it. Now, I just want to know, how do we deal with that tendency of finding some amongst us deviating from this, doing that for their self-interest or self-enrichment? Lastly, I want to know more from the question paper about the allocation of marks. Maybe it's because I once being a teacher. Section 1, History of EFF. You said when and where was the EFF formed? Then you say 10 marks. I don't know whether it's a... But what I want to understand, DP, is maybe you find that some of my delegation can answer the question of where, which, according to my experience, can deserve a mark. And then at later stage, they even go for where was it formed, which can give 2 marks. But I want to know if there's something that is behind wherein we have to explain more to get that 10 marks. Because if you don't be open with us, we will answer the question of where and then when. And then you find that you are giving us 3 marks. And then where is the 7 marks for? Thank you.
Number 2 of the men. I will explain the question paper this evening. I will request the House that we look into the founding manifesto. So you must not know when was the EFF formed and not know where. They go together. So it will be divided into 2. It's very easy. Maraga knows. It's very easy, straightforward, and it's that important. You cannot be an EFF member and not know when were we formed and where. Yeah, because we allocate the importance to that founding moment. And in the experience, DP, it's actually a very big thing that people don't know. By the way, where we've been going around here. Now, number 2 of the men.
Greetings, Commissar Ndlozi, and greetings to the DP, and greetings to all the provincial leaders who are here with us, and my fellow RCT political education heads. My question is on complementary pillar number 2. My name is Mlungsele Dibela from Alfred Nzo in the Eastern Cape. The complementary pillar number 2 speaks of public representatives using public service. So I feel like the EFF is not that vocal in ensuring that our public representatives are adhering to this complementary cardinal pillar, because majority of our public representatives, they use private services. They've got medical aids, and et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted clarity on that.
Okay. Thank you. Number 3 of the ladies, please stand. Yes, Mama.
Greeting, Commissar and DP and everyone. My name is Lindy Wehegep, as known as from Fighter Zisongo from KZN Umkanyagute region. I have a concern and a question regard to these migration issues. I'm not talking because I'm married to a foreigner or outside the country. I just have a concern about this issue. I see that the EFF will take up the struggle of all the immigration and immigrant in this country, and many of these immigrants are denied medical care and so on and so on. But I wish us to look at this issue of the Immigration Department of Home Affairs, the ways how they treat our former brothers and sisters from other African continent, because there is a lot is going on there. I want us to open the eyes there and the leadership of the EFF to take and look seriously nationally, the Department of Home Affairs. They've got this tendency, I don't understand, but they treat them very not good. And I'm worried because a lot of our brothers and sisters from other countries have been in Tanzania. The South Africa who were there, they came here because they were protecting South Africa when they were there as in exile, and a lot of them are well trained from other countries. And when the South Africa is not treating them not well, or when they are not giving them the document the way they're supposed to give them the document, I'm afraid we are feeding the monsters in South Africa. And then we'll find ourselves one day, we'll have those Boko Haram issues. But if you don't take this thing serious and speed up, as the EFF is able to do things, and it's able to do things to happen, not the government which is ruling now. But if it's an EFF, they're able to take this matter and this issue being resolved. Thank you.
Number 3 of the men.
Thank you very much, Commissar Mbuyiseni, and greetings to the DP. My name is Coach Dipoko. I'm the provincial chair of the Free State. Mine is very simple. The 21st of February 1848, the first draft of the Communist Manifesto was presented. And this work is attributed to 2 males predominantly, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. Would it be wrong if we were to perhaps ask Kuri, because when I look at the founding manifesto, I see a complete document. I might be wrong, but I see a very complete document. But would it be wrong to ask whose brains were poured into this document? At least we recognize them as much as the Communist Manifesto recognized Marx and Engels. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Number 4 of the ladies.
Tawela, Lina Laga Kinamashuma Sinsha from Mupani, Limpopo. My first question is based on the socio-economic issues. On the unemployment issue, what is the EFF doing to bridge the unemployment gap within the organization, for starter? And then for crime issue, what is it the EFF that is doing to make sure or to minimize the crime that is happening in our areas? And then on poverty, what is the EFF doing to help minimize the alleviation of poverty? And then my second question is, I saw on the manifesto there is a issue of domination. From our branch levels to the national, we have our leaders, Baloro, they are leading on the ground, they are leading in the regional level or either in the province. So if we have a person leading in the branch, leading in the region, or even in council, so like that is, according to me, it's a hinder, yeah, domination. So like I feel like it's something yellow relocation. And then the other thing, the bourgeoisie. What is the EFF doing to bring about entrepreneurship? Because the only way that we can be participants in the economy is through entrepreneurship. So what is the EFF doing to help us, to help these young men and women to be in entrepreneurship? Thank you very much.
Number 4 of the men. Please rise. Backbone.
Thanks, Commissar. So DPU emphasized that we. My name is Offense from PCT member from the Northwest Province. DP made an emphasis that we are not a sect, and this means to a great extent we must capture not only the state, but as a road to capturing the state, we must also capture state institutions and collapse them and rebuild through a dictatorship of the proletariat. So in doing so, Commissar, to what extent can we capture with speed state institutions, your courts, your universities, and so forth, in ensuring that we now overtake them with the dictatorship of the proletariat? Number 2, Commissar, is I understand that the 7 non-negotiable pillars are sacrosanct,
But when it comes to Pillar 1 of the EFF, which Commissioner Mbuyiseni yesterday made clear that it is the one that is going to assist us in resolving the inequalities, because inequalities are as a result of the means of production. Now, to what extent, Commissioner, can we simplify the pillar to the extent that we make sure that those who dispossessed us of the land, they don't just give the land back to us, but also they then give us the land with the resources and the profits they've made from the land? And to what extent also can we break the limits when it comes to punishing those who have taken the land from us? Thanks, Commissioner.
Number 5 of the women.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Ontatile from Tshwane. I have a few questions. My first question is on the opening quote on the founding manifesto, the quote from the rest of the earth on each generation. So my question to you, Commissioner and DP, is that if we were to write a historiography of the EFF and the EFF Students' Command, how would we categorize the moment of when the Students' Command was formed? What would we term it as? Which moment is it in history? Is it still the generation of economic freedom, or is it another moment within the generation of economic freedom? That's my first question. And my second question, DP mentioned something on creating new cities and our approach to cities and stuff. So my question is that there's been some work on radical geographers that we don't need more cities, that cities are a result of capitalist consumption, and that we need to basically redefine the city as we know it. So my question is, do you think, DP, that we need more cities, or we need to somewhat, as the EFF, redefine how we view and understand cities, especially because when you look at the cities today, the CBDs are eroding. There's not a lot of employment going on. There's not a lot of economic activity going on in cities. People are going to suburban areas and stuff. So what would be our approach as the EFF to cities and spatial planning, and how would that approach be filtered down to local government, to our councillors? How would we have that approach be filtered down to the legislature is part of it? And my last question is on the Minerals Act. DP mentioned something on the state being the custodian of mineral rights. So my issue is that, yes, even though it does say that we are the state is the custodian of mineral rights, but it does not give full expression to that, because the state merely acts as administrators. So how do we, as the EFF, embark on a campaign to make sure that the clause that says the state is the custodian of the mineral rights finds true expression, so we can actually implement pillar number 2 of the nationalization of mines, banks, and other strategic means of the economy? Thank you.
Number 5 of the men, please stand. Thank you.
No, thanks. Greetings to you, Commissioner Mbuyiseni, and to the Deputy President of the EFF. My name is Kagiso, from the Western Cape PCT, responsible for Pol Ed. Look, perhaps maybe the DP can reflect on because the founding manifesto doesn't do this, I think. The dominant capitalist forces that are operating in the South African context, especially during our transition, if the DP can reflect on that, because I want to also ask the question, who is the proletariat in the South African context? Because I think the dispossession of the land dispossessed us of our labor power, and as a consequence created us as the proletariat. So isn't the rural peasantry the proletariat in the South African and African context? The second component is capital no longer exploits only the working class. It also reduces us to be unemployed and unemployable. For example, the phenomena of the amaparapara, right? How do we respond to that? Does the founding manifesto also, think about that, and what does it say about that? Because there's also another phenomena, the exploit or the creation of the unemployed graduates. And when you look at them, Commissioner, they are majority black. Like if you look at the campaign Hire a Graduate, majority of them are black. So there's a particular form of capitalism operating in South Africa. The other one is of course, there's the Troika, the Marxist, Fanonian, and Leninism. Why can't we, at least in, in the African context, why can't we elevate Fanon a bit higher than the two? Because I think it's going to be important to keep in check Marxism and Leninism, especially the philosophy that informs Marxism. It's not an African philosophy. We have our own philosophy, we have our own philosophers, we have our way in which we think, respond, and conceptualize culture and tradition. The last one is okay. Let me stop there, Commissioner. I think the next one will raise it in the Marxism.
Number
component.
6 of the women. Thank you. Yeah, I think you are right. The philosophies and the Marxisms and the Leninisms, we have a lot to still go through that. Because I can see that there is a spectra haunting the room. The spectra of Marxism, which must be received like the Holy Ghost, and we shall baptize you properly in it. Marx is very universal and fundamentally anti-Eurocentric. I think there's been a serious bastardization, which DP, you really have to speak strongly on this one when the moment arrives, to the universality of the signature of capitalism. Mama?
Sanbonani, Commissar, ngiyabonga igama lami nguNtebu Majeni from Ekurhuleni. The first question that I have is based on the educational system that we have in South Africa as a whole. How do we work in terms of changing the educational system? Because today we are here because of education. But when you look at our education in terms of where our kids are at school, there is nothing that is being learned on a daily basis. From grade R up to grade 12, when you leave the school, you are empty-minded. How do you work in actually empowering our youth out there from a young age? How do we change the political or the educational system so that we can learn of things that are relevant at this particular time? And then the second question that I have, don't you think we should have educational camps going forward, because of we have this educational induction that we have today, but I don't think it's adequate for us to can actually carry it through. There's a whole lot that needs to be learned so that a mind of a black man can be changed in time. So I think educational camps should be initiated by the EFF, whereby we will be able to learn and at the same time empower ourselves mentally so that we can be able to empower other people when we go out there. Because I don't think 3 to 4 days of the workshop or the educational political induction that we're going to be giving them when we go back is going to be enough. So there's still more time that is required also to learn. In those camps, I think we need to also be physically fit for whatever that is coming, because whatever that we are preparing for, I don't think indlela izoba lula. So ngicabanga ukuthi sizodinga amandla neplug. So kulama camps kuzodinga ukuthi amadoda abafazi baba abafazi. I think we should work towards that so that we can prepare for the future that is coming, because there's a whole lot that is coming. Uchincho malufika lifike kamnandi. So I think it's something that we also need to consider, also preparing forward. Looking at pillar number 1, or land expropriation without compensation, also in looking at it in branch levels, where we have on our branches people who are expropriating land. They do expropriate land, we do have that land, but the problem, it becomes an informal settlement that also needs services. And at the end of the day, it also become a hub for criminals. How do we work towards that so that we can help also the meaning behind expropriation of land without compensation in our branches? Can we also, Commissar, help me in terms of colonization? Can we go more into colonization? What measures do we have as an organization, as a preparation of other forms of colonization, like food colonization? Because I see we are going into that. What preparation do we have when we get to that stage whereby we can be able to help our people? Nyabong.
Number last of the men. Sure.
Greetings, fellow commissars and fighters. Greetings to yourself, Commissar Dr. Ndlozi. Greetings to the Deputy President. My name is Mpomorokolo, Regional Chairperson of Nkangala from Mpumalanga. Well, I must first start by appreciating Deputy President, the manner in which we were outlining what we must advance first before we can capture the state power, where today you have actually educated us that we need organizational power to get mass power, which I've known for far too long that under Section 4 of the Constitution that we need political power and state power so that we can be able to transform the economy. But through the implementation of the EFF 7 cardinal pillars. So, DP, I think I wish to lobby you that you take us into confidence because of the allegations. I can call them allegations made by the reckless SG of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula, who said that the cardinal pillars of the EFF are stolen from the Youth League as part of the resolutions. So I want you to give us, to logically dismiss them, so that when we go back home to go and educate the membership of the EFF, we can do so with a proper clarity. And the other thing, under progressive internationalism, DP, I want to appreciate the effort demonstrated by the organization in solidarity with the people of Swaziland who are actually brutalized by the state. They have been killed. Others have been followed at their homes because they are fighting for their conviction for democracy in Swaziland. Okay. So after, I want to close it, Commissar.
Yeah.
After those efforts that we have made as the organization, because we have embarked on peaceful protest demonstrations in almost all the borders in Swaziland, what are we going to do? Because there is a continuation of those brutalities by the state.
You are in the PCT.
I'm in the RCT.
Yeah, those
PCT
are
also.
Questions of what happens are part of the political program you as leaders must provide. Do you have a question other than what are we going to do?
No, you know why I'm asking this, Commissioner? Because, look, I feel like it's not enough. I'm asking this thing because I think
you are part of having to answer that question. So let's say that the Deputy President must respond to the other questions. Unless you have any other question. The programmatic questions, I'm sure you realize. I mean, that's why you were elected.
All right, thank you very much.
DP, let's take responses so that we can go to tea. I don't know if you can do that in 15 minutes. Yeah. Remember the convolution of issues. There's still a lot of repetition that the Constitution as well as the ideological tools of analysis are going to deal with. Okay.
Amandla, I'm just going to respond to, so the founding manifesto of the EFF was written by the 1,200 delegates that attended the National Assembly on what is to be done. It's a product of that National Assembly on what is to be done. And that is the outcome of a collective effort. You know, when you read in the EFF Constitution, in terms of the principles of organizational democracy, in one of the principles, it emphasizes a central point that we should, as members and activists of the EFF, avoid claiming individual success over collective victories. That is the essence of the organization. Like you find a regional chairperson or provincial that I did all this thing. It's me here. You can't be you. It's the organization. The organization is at the center of everything else that we do. Also, you can't lead a revolution alone. Like, it's impossible. It's not advisable even. No matter how you think you are as a revolutionary. You always need to exist within a collective mandate. So the founding manifesto of the EFF, it's a product of consultations and was produced by the National Assembly on what is to be done on the 26th and 27th of July 2013 in terms of what got to happen. So in the ANC clique, we were responsible for political education, policy, research, spokesperson, all of those things. And then we're mandated to develop a perspective which was called the Clarion Call to All Economic Freedom Fighters, a program of action for economic freedom in our lifetime. And then a very deep consultative process that, by the way, started with a political school, Komisambu is saying, then produced a perspective which was beginning to contextualize what is economic freedom in our lifetime. And then we're mandated to speak to that. It had cardinal pillars, but it's not the same as the cardinal pillars of the EFF. Yeah, there's never been a... So that document is a public document. We can actually get to circulate it. It was one of the turning points in terms of the politics then of the Congress Youth League in terms of what happened. Even that perspective is a product of a political school of the ANC Youth League that time. Because sometimes we can assign you to type what we are all of us saying there, and then you say, no, it's me who has produced this document. It's my document. That is, you are a typist. So sometimes typing is not necessarily that you have produced. These ideas are a product of collective effort. And collective ideas is expression of different interests of different people. So no one should ever claim individual victory over collective outcomes in terms of the revolutionary agenda and principles that we have got to embrace as an organization. I think that is the essence of what this organization is all about. And that is part of the reasons why this organization is going to live forever, where it is not dependent on any of its component leaders or members. So none of us must think that we are the eighth cardinal pillar. We must always push organization forward in terms of... Actually, in the Constitution, it says that at all times, you must present the organization to shine, it must actually even hide you, that this is the organization that has got... Even sometimes, even on work which you have maybe put individual effort on, sometimes you should say that this is the organization that should shine as opposed to you as an individual. That is how the organization must always be understood at all times. And there's a fighter who was sleeping majority of the time from the Western Cape who stood up to ask questions which I didn't understand. And because I was presenting here, he was fast asleep. And understandably, because they traveled for a very long time from the Western Cape. But he was the only one who was sleeping. And then he asked the questions about class reductionism. I don't know what that is, but the EFF is a working class organization. It's not class reductionism. It's a working class organization that fights for the working class, and unapologetically and decisively so. And for us to achieve the success of such a struggle, we should raise the levels of class consciousness amongst the people. And then the ones who have taken political power and state power, all other aspects are going to be determined by the agenda of the working class. Even the manner in which higher education is organized, how society is organized, how ideas get to be propagated in society. Yesterday we spoke about the Ho Chi Minh Institute and Academy of Politics in Vietnam, which is an official institution which produces official outcomes, state-led, but it teaches Marxism. Even Peking University in the People's Republic of China, they teach proper Marxism because they know that to protect the revolution, you have to reproduce the Marxist thoughts. That will always be aligned. I'm very concerned, by the way, Commissioner Mbuyiseni, because of her student activism background. I think I've been a student activist. I think the most involved student activist, like led from a branch level, became SRC president, and led all the youth organizations at the national level, at the region, province, everywhere. Won SRC elections not only where I was studying, in different other universities, the entirety of South Africa. Founded the South African Union of Students, wrote its constitution, that I can say. In terms of what got to happen. But I'm worried that most fighters who are in student politics, they get locked there and always see society. They think university is the be-all and end-all of everything. It's not. It's not at all. Every time, university to colonize education, it's very important. But that education must be located within the community struggles. Even the founding perspective of the EFF Student Command demands that student activists must be involved in community struggles. And we always express this anxiety about student activism, that it sometimes can produce deformed cadres, because university doesn't give you the space to learn proper organizing, because the university has already organized students for you. It's not you who organize them. The university has organized students. You just mobilize them into a meeting. And then because you then feel like you have organized a big